Hello everyone, can you make your way to your seats and settle down? We're going to be starting in a minute. Thank you. Hello everyone, we're back again, and this time for our closing panel. And we're going to be looking forward at the way forward, both for translators, for translation, and for accessibility. This panel is going to touch on themes we've already discussed with an eye to the future. It's going to be chaired by John O'Shea, who's president of Fit Europe and is on the Linde expert group. John, I'm going to pass the floor to you. You can introduce your panelists, and I will be coming back a little bit later for your questions. John.
Is it working? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, and welcome to my fabulous guests here today. We have a rather unenviable task in this closing panel today, because we have to take into account everything that's been said over the last couple of days, all the major themes which have emerged. Pay, rates, machine translation, quality, the position of humans in the translation ecosystem going forward, the role of universities going forward, and so on. And to look at how we can imagine what's going to happen in the future. So we have to play in some way the role of magicians staring into a crystal ball, trying to predict the future. So before we get down to the actual discussion of all these very interesting topics and what the way forward might look like, let me introduce my panel to you. Let me start with Britta Aagaard. She's the CBO of Semantix and is on the board of Gala. There's also a member of the European Commission's Language Industry Expert Group with me. And she's also on the LT Innovation Board and brings us a language industry perspective to today's panel. You will probably already know Adrian Probst from the panel yesterday. He's a freelance translator working from English into French and Swiss German. He has his own YouTube channel, which he talked to us about yesterday. He posts 1 or 2 videos a week about freelancing. He's relatively new to the sector, with 5 or 6 years under his belt, and has seen his business grow considerably in the last 2 years, so he represents the perspective of young translators for us. We have Rudy Loock, who's a professor of linguistics and translation studies at Lille University, and his teaching and research interests include translation technology, corpora as tools in translation, the use of machine translation by students, and so on. He's also on the board of the EMT network, and is vice president of the French Association for University Translator Training Programs, and therefore represents the perspective of universities. And sitting next to me, we have James Hurrell, who is currently head of content and localization at BBC Studios. Prior to working at the BBC, James held operational management roles in a number of national and international broadcasters and distributors, and is inspired by the passion people have for localization. He's on the DEG and MESA localization committees and represents the content buyer perspective for us today, particularly in the ABT sector. So to start off with this discussion today, Britta, I'd like to start with you. So from the perspective of LSPs, language service providers or language service companies, what recent developments and technologies do you think are worth keeping an eye on looking forward?
Thank you very much, and it's great to be in this wonderful setting here. I've been looking forward to this. I think that, and we have seen this the past 2-3 days, that the discussion about human versus machine, that is a discussion we have had for a decade or more. And the question has always been around whether automation makes human redundant and in the end also compromises quality. I think that is a very closed and narrow discourse. And I believe that we should have the discourse about what machines, not what machines cannot do, but what we as humans can do together with the machines. I also think that the discussion we have had in this forum sometimes is too narrow on MT. AI is so much more. And I was hugely inspired, Michael, by your keynote this morning. And speaking about trends and developments, I think this is exactly what we see. That we need to see this in a more global context, in the context of globalization and digital transformation. All the corporates, all the governments, NGOs everywhere can see that language is no longer a question about translating in a narrow sense. It's not about receiving accurate information in another language. It's about communication, it's about collaboration, about empowerment and knowledge, and very much also in the spirit of the theme of this, access for all. For companies, I guess also for you, James, language has also become a strategic asset. And the interesting part when we look at technology in this perspective is that it can no longer be separate from the format, the channels, connectivity. So for language buyers, it is not only about the actual core translation, it's also about the stream, how this content is created, how it's constantly updated. Translation is no longer, I'm sure you know that as well, Adrian, you don't get a document anymore, you deliver it back and that's it. Content is a stream today, a constant stream. So the very, very interesting development I can see is that localization has become an interdisciplinary function also in many companies. And successful global companies understand that. And here is a great opportunity for all of us. And the technology is also enabling democratization. If we understand that language in essence is knowledge and is data, then we also need to use the technology to actually bring the knowledge to everyone who wants it and needs it with a certain speed. And technology helps us with that. That also requires that we look at, when I mentioned quality, I think we need to get a different discussion into the notion of quality. It needs to be more multidimensional. It's, as I said, it's about speed, it's about connectivity, it's about management of content. So these are the very high-level macro trends I see. So it's not only a futurist view that we have seen from our keynote. This is actually happening.
Thank you very much for that, Britta. Rudy, can I turn to you now? So in light of what Britta's just been talking about, as someone who's training a future generation of language professionals, how can you make sure that humans still add value? What are your thoughts on this very broad topic?
That's a very big question. That's the key issue. The key issue for us is to empower students so that they become aware of their added value over technology, because technology is just all over the place. It's not difficult to use. It's not going to go away. You can use empty by just copying and pasting. But what is much more difficult is for students, future professionals, to understand when should I use MT, when should I not use MT, how shall I use it, what kind of post-editing is necessary. And all these are very, very human skills. They are definitely necessary. It also relates to what we discussed last night in the last panel with the issue of quality. That's also a very human skill to understand the quality that is going to be needed. So all this relates to actually project management. And in universities today, well, in many universities today, a lot of time is spent on these issues of translation project management. I'm sure some trainers in the room know that. If you take the European Masters in Translations competence framework, you'll see that among the skills, 16 of them are related to translation management and interpersonal skills, which are once again, very human skills. So we're already focusing on that in many universities. Contrary to what was said yesterday, we are not disconnected from the real world. And by the way, we belong to the real world in universities. We're not disconnected. We know what's happening there. And it's really a big issue for us to try and make our students aware where their human touch has to be. Yes, technology is there, it's not going to go away. MT is there, it's not going to go away, but there's definitely some room for human intervention. Just only linguistically speaking, that was said in the previous, that was a question of debate in the previous panels this morning. MT provides some kind of linguistics transfer, and that's it. There's nothing cultural, there's no creativity most of the time. That's the job of the human translator coming afterwards. So all these are very human skills. It's a big challenge for us. It's something that we definitely need to work on, and our job is clearly to make sure that our students adapt to a society where you said there is a digital transformation going on. Definitely, that's definitely our role, and in doing so, I think we are very, very connected to the real world.
Thank you very much for that, Rudy. And Adrian, if I could turn quickly to you now. So you're someone relatively new to the profession, as we said, 5 or 6 years into your career. How do you feel personally about this rise in technology and the use of technology? Do you see a future for yourself in the profession? In the recent European language industry surveys and in some surveys conducted by Fit Europe in recent years, we've seen what has been dubbed a high degree of stickiness in our professions, that once people join the translation or language professions, they don't really want to leave. Do you agree with this idea of stickiness?
It's an interesting term, I definitely agree. First of all, to your first question, 100%, I see a future in this profession for me, or rather in this industry. I don't know if the profession I currently do will be what I will be doing, but I'm not afraid of change. I like change. I think we were discussing beforehand, we want to spread positivity in this final panel. And, you know, change is growth. Change is good. It's not something to be afraid of. And people that are able to adapt will drive change. In terms of, I mentioned already in yesterday's panel how I see myself changing a bit. So I'm not going to rehash that. But when you speak of stickiness, that's an interesting point, because I talk to a lot of students, right? With what I do almost every day. And a lot of people wrote me yesterday, and I will get back to you. I didn't get the chance yet, but that's amazing, this kind of exchange that I get to have with people. And the two main things that I see there, that the worries, the fears that people have are, again, the fear of technology taking over, and the second one is not knowing where to start. So there is a, even after university, for many people, there seems to be a barrier of a high barrier of entrance. I don't know where to start, how to get into it. And that's something we need to work on, because I think yesterday you mentioned numbers that there are not enough people entering the industry anymore. And Britta, you also said that talent is lacking, right? You're always looking for people. But once they are working in the industry, they don't want to leave. And why would they, right? It's the best job in the world, so that's why we do it. To the fact, when they are scared of technology, I always go through kind of like a thought experiment with them, and sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. Michael mentioned in the morning that there is 2.5 quintillion bytes of data produced every single day. That is insane. You try to simplify it with scientific notions. I'm going to simplify it even further. That's 18 zeros, okay? A quintillion, that's a billion billions. It's unbelievable to even capture that, right? And I sorry to the interpreters for all these numbers. That must be very hard. I have no idea how to say that in German, what I just said. But you've been doing an amazing job, all forums, so thank you very much. Back to my point. 90% of the data produced in the world right now has been produced in the last 2 years, right? That's unbelievable to imagine. And once you realize that we should be thankful for machines to help us, because I don't want to work on this noise, right? Neither should you. We should focus on highly specific, highly specialized, highly consumer-facing and premium content, and then let the machine do the rest. And I think once you realize that, you can use it to your advantage in the way forward.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I just need to have a great round of applause also to the panel yesterday about these young people entering the industry, taking over the floor. I think I think we all should learn from them. I think we have a responsibility to level up our discussion, that it doesn't get narrow, because this digital first generation, they will actually lift also this industry to a higher level. So thank you for that, Adrian.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that intervention, Britta. So James, if I can come to you. So you're a buyer of translation services. How do you see the future of your specific sector, which is localization? What are your thoughts about the increasing technologization which is occurring in that sector? And what do you see as the role of humans in the entire process from your perspective?
So thanks for that nice, easy question, John. Apologies to everybody. It's been a long, long time since I came out of university, and I know that there's a lot of academics here, so I slightly panicked and wrote far too many notes. So sorry about that. But yeah, so I'm going to take that question in three parts. All right. So as a buyer of localization, how do I see the future of my specific sector? So my specific sector is television localization. Someone said it earlier on the panel, localization is not an afterthought. Localization it's part of the process. I tend not to think about localization, I think about it as globalization. So when we are thinking about when our shows will deliver, we're thinking about how many languages we can localize them in and how many markets we can sell them into. I think that producers that think the same way, they will maximize the profit on the products that they make. There has been a huge increase in demand for localization over the last 5 years, and this has been driven in part because the advent of all the streaming industries, and also the traditional broadcasters who are now launching VOD platforms are capitalising on their very vast archives and localising those as well, to give their audiences more value for money for the services that they pay for the streaming services. Told you I had lots of notes. And of course the impact is that with more content being produced, that distributors, and you guys call them language service providers, we'd know them as localization studios, but I'll say LSPs so that we keep the acronyms uniform. All right. So the LSPs are all then trying to hire the same skilled localization experts, but from quite a small pool of resource. So it's really, really important that we all work together and encourage more and more skilled professionals into the entertainment localization industry, and that it is sticky and that they do stay. The second question was, what are my thoughts on the increase in technologies? So I just want to clarify this, or qualify it rather. I am absolutely not an expert on AI or MT. Right? So as a buyer of localization, BBC Studios commissions all of its localization work to LSPs. And we don't ever contract directly with translators. So it's been amazing to be here and hear it from the translators' points of view as well. I've learned so much in the last 2 days. Absolutely incredible. Sorry, I couldn't get here until yesterday, but it's been amazing. Basically, in preparation for this panel, I spoke with a number of different LSPs and AI and MT experts, and the one thing that they all told me unanimously was that they need the AI and MT to deal with the increased demand that they're seeing from people like myself that are placing work with them. They also agree, and you'll be pleased to hear, that humans are and will be and continue to be an essential part of the process. For me, as a distributor, speed to market while ensuring that quality is so, so important. Often now the timelines between delivery from our production teams into me in distribution and then out for localization so that we can globalize the product, they're increasingly short timelines. And if AI and MT can help expedite that process, that's something for us that's really, really valuable. We've also found that working remotely in the cloud can be a real value add as well. And the final part of the question was, what is the role of humans in the process? So, we believe that, because obviously it's debatable because of all the debates that have been happening here, but we believe that MT saves time and it helps with capacity planning and resourcing. And that does have value, but only when a human is in the loop to make that output correct and polished. Again, the experts tell me that the machines will augment the process for humans, and that will allow the humans to focus on areas where they really add value. They also feel that within a few years, machine translation post-editing will be a normalized process and it will be widely used. Someone gave me a really good example about how humans and machines already work in harmony. There are many, many examples, but this one I thought was quite funny. So they said to me, okay, you're getting on an aeroplane to fly to Australia. Do you want to go on the aeroplane that has no computer on board or the one that has the latest computer technology? I knew what I would pick, the one with the latest computer technology. Yeah, so that should answer that.
Thank you very much for that. That's quite an interesting observation. Britta, could I come quickly to you? So we heard James there talking about the idea of humans working together with technology, but also we've heard over the last couple of days this whole question about rates and pay. And could you give us some of your perspectives from the LSP side about what could be done in the future to rectify this situation? Because we've heard a lot of people, rightly so, complaining about pay issues.
Yeah, I think that is a very big and complex question. I heard yesterday in one of the sessions that someone, can't remember exactly who, said that the word rate model will not go away. I don't think so, and that would be the first step towards fair payment, I believe. I actually think that one of the biggest problems is not machine translation per se. That's more the CAT tools. That is the problem, because we tend to squeeze everything in the CAT tools, also the MT. And the CAT tools are actually the origin of the word rate model. So I can also see that there are, from a technical point of view, we see that the CAT tools in some way are not adequate anymore. And I can see that there are developments going on that essentially also, and hopefully, will remove the traditional CAT tool. And I believe that this trend also points in the direction to that we will have fair pay by the hour or by the time that is spent. I think that is a natural consequence, and I very, very much encourage that for the whole industry.
Thank you very much for that. Rudy, if I could come back to you now. So we've heard from James and from Britta now that the essential role that humans play in the entire translation ecoscape. What would you say to encourage young people to think about studying translation? Because we also heard as well that there's been a decline in registrations in universities. In FIT's recent position paper, they said that the actual existence of a future generation of translators is contingent on the status of the profession being sufficiently attractive to appeal to newcomers. So could you share some of your thoughts about that, how to make it attractive to get people to study at university?
Well, that's an easy question for me, because that's something we have to do all the time. The first thing I would say, and that is essential, and it relates to what we've been talking about concerning MT, don't listen too much to what is said about machine translation. All the hype about we don't need translators anymore. There is human parity between MT output and human translations. The problem is we know this is not true. But outside the translation profession, People don't know. The general public does not know. We all have friends or family members who said, oh, that's so great, machine translation. I have an app on my smartphone and I can go to any country in the world. We don't need translators anymore. Except that, of course, you never hire a translator when you go on translation, so that has nothing to do with the translation profession. But there is this bias in the general public, and this is where we have something to do. All of us, the industry, the trainers, everyone involved, we need to convey the message that, yes, machine translation is there, it's technology, it's a tool, but it's not going to take over human translators, because the general public doesn't know that, and of course, prospective students don't know that. I have students who tell me my mom wanted to talk me out of joining a master's program in translation because she told me, well, there's Google Translate now, you shouldn't do translation studies, right? So that's the idea that clearly is circulated in the general public. So we have a role to play there. We need to spread the good word. MT is here to stay. We're not going to tell our students not to use it. I tell my students to use it all the time, including for exams. So clearly I don't have an issue with that. But the question is, we need to make them aware that it does not mean the end of the translation profession. So that's the first thing I would say, and I would insist on that, and that's what I say during the first week of classes every year. The second thing I say is, just look at all the possibilities. This is a fun industry. There are so many different kinds of projects. There are so many different kinds of things you can do. You can do localization. You can do specialized translation for different kinds of companies in so many different fields. This is a fun, actually, profession, definitely, and profession with an S, actually. There are many, many professions out there. It's true that it is an industry where there are changes all the time. We discussed this. It can be worrying, but it's also exciting. It's also exciting to know that there are changes all the time in this profession. So I would tell my students, look at all the possibilities out there. There are so many. There's also this issue in this post-pandemic world where actually most of translators today, they work as self-employed. And this is very 21st century, actually. It seems many people want to do that. So it's a good argument to tell students, well, you will be your own boss, you will be self-employed. That's very in the post-pandemic mood that we are having. And finally, I will also tell them, don't listen to, if you want to join a university program, don't listen to professionals who graduated 20 years ago and who think that what is being done in universities today could still correspond to what was done 20 years ago. That is absolutely not true. Do not listen to them. They are actually the ones that are not connected to the reality. I would say instead, listen to young professionals like the excellent panel we had yesterday afternoon, where there was so much positive attitude. That was very interesting, very convincing, and I hope inspiring for prospective students. So these are the things I would say. Join the translation profession via university program. There's a lot of fun out there and many opportunities.
Thank you very, very much. Britta, you want to add something on that?
Yeah, always. I think there's such an interesting point you're making here. For example, about Google's statement that now we have reached human parity. This is actually Google doesn't care about translation quality or not. But see this as even big tech has realized that language is actually at the center of AI. I mean, what an opportunity for us. I mean, even the big ones have seen that language is at the core of artificial intelligence. And I normally say that, half of data is numerical, the rest is textual. And in this global connected world, textual is always multilingual. And that is tough. The machines cannot deal with that. So the humans are more important than ever.
Thank you very much. Adrian, you probably spoke about this already a bit yesterday, but and also you mentioned that you talk about this a lot with the people who follow your videos. But what would you say to encourage a young future generation of translators, people to enter the profession?
Yeah, I was just thinking, it's kind of tough to follow that because that was such a perfect answer. I don't know. You took all the words out of my mouth. And no, it's perfect. I mean, what you mentioned about parents and outsiders hit very close to home. When I told my parents I want to study translation, my dad was like, you know, we support you in everything you do, but don't everyone already speak English? Do you really need that? Luckily, I went for it, and yeah, it changed my life for the better. But there is also, as you said yesterday, we heard a bit of negativity around universities, but of course most universities are doing their best with the budget constraints, with the limitations they have, to stay up to date. And 3 universities actually reached out to me personally, and I know of other freelancers who were also contacted from universities around Europe to be actively involved in curriculum design and helping them. Well, I don't consider myself qualified for that, and I tell them that, but they still want just my opinion on it and just real-world examples, and of course I'm willing to share that. And I will soon start to also work as in part of a translation program somewhere, so it's amazing what's happening there. And actually my old university in Switzerland is a very good example of that. After I had finished my translation studies, they I think a year after, they changed the name of the program to Applied Languages. And I've just got a newsletter that next year they will change it again to Multilingual Communication. So that's a really interesting shift there. Whether it's good or not, I mean, everyone can decide. But for me, that's interesting because it opens up a new world of possibilities in the business of languages, right? You're then not constrained to just being a translator. Of course, you can be that. I would love to be that, but I noticed that it doesn't work that much anymore. That's why I said yesterday I rather market myself now as a language specialist, and that seems to be the same idea from the academic point of view, which I really like. And as we said before, if you're a talented, hardworking person, you will be needed, as Britta said. And it might feel intimidating, it does. Imposter syndrome is real, you will feel it for sure, even if you're the most talented. Everyone feels it. What do you think I feel sitting up here with these people? But it gets better, right? Yesterday I was extremely terrified, and today I'm just terrified. So it's there is improvement, and that's growth, and that's progress. So next time I will be maybe a bit calmer. But yeah, just go for it.
Thank you very much for that, Adrian. James, can I ask you probably a very, very difficult question, like all my questions. Where do you see the role of humans in the process 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line? We've taken the crystal ball out now, we're gazing into the future.
Does anybody know the lottery numbers for the weekend? John, I don't know. That's a really difficult question to answer, which is why you've asked me it. Look, you know, as Rudy says, MT is here to stay. I think technology is only going to get better and better, and I really can't see a world where machine translation isn't a normal part of the localization process. I think for all the professionals that are getting into localization now, it's so good to hear that Rudy is actually encouraging them to work with MT and allowing it as part of your exam process as well. It's really, really encouraging. Yeah.
Okay, so since it's such a difficult question, I'll also put it to Britta.
Yeah, it is a difficult question, and we you probably know this this quote that we tend to overestimate the effect of tech in the short run and underestimate the effect in the long run. So I believe that we have only seen the beginning. AI and machine learning is simply changing everything, every part of our life, not only translation. And as I just said, I think that is, despite maybe the bleakiness we also, I think that is a fantastic opportunity. And I would almost say that I in this past, can't even say months, but paradigm shifts, you never know when they really happen. But there's something emerging here. There is, and maybe 5 years when we look back at the recordings of this session, we saw this is actually somehow a historic moment. I think there is a paradigm shift happening, and especially because we now have a generation that is able to see all this in a bigger context and take the responsibility and the opportunity that language is actually part of solving our humanity's biggest challenges. And the generation, I also have children a little bit younger than yours, but I can see that is a generation that is much more activistic than we have been. So I think there's so much hope for the future. What exactly the technology in terms of tools will be, I don't know, but the future is really, really bright.
Thank you very much. And Adrian, could you give your thoughts about the same question? How do you see things 5, 10, 20 years down the line?
Yeah, since I'm representing freelancers up here, I'm going to answer this from a freelancer's perspective. I think the future, if you want to succeed, is kind of based on two factors, which I would say is networking, the number one, and the second one, never settle. Never settle is a phrase that I tell myself all the time again. Never settle in raising your rates. Never settle in going out there, meeting new people, learning about technology, being curious about things you like, but also things you wouldn't usually like. You know, that's the key. When you, let's say you are terrified about language technology. People are terrified of things they don't know, right? Try to, maybe around Christmas you have some days off, maybe spend 1 or 2 days just learning the basics, right? If you work in this industry, you should know what these acronyms stand for that are terrifying. But if you understand them and you actually see the value in them, it can alleviate a lot of pain. Yeah, I would say just don't lay back, stay ahead of the curve, and of course always charge what you're worth. Don't undercharge. Don't be afraid. I see so many people are just scared to charge more than they actually should, according to the industry standards. It doesn't make sense, right? You don't charge for just your work. You are an educated professional. You charge for the time you've studied. You charge for the time that you spent in the industry, and there is really no limit. So sometimes people tell me, "Oh, I wish I could charge this and this much," and this doesn't need to be the limit, right? You have to realize that, and of course it's tough. I understand. When you're starting out, I understand this is all irrelevant what I'm saying, but a bit further down the line, I hope this will be helpful.
Thank you very much. And Rudy, could you give your thoughts on the same question?
Well, I have no idea what's going to happen in even 5 or 10 years. Don't forget, I'm an academic, so I live in an ivory tower. So, but what I know, apart from the joke, is that, and that's what I tell my students, you're right, we are in the middle of, we don't even know if we're in the middle of, maybe it's only the beginning of some kind of definitely technological revolution, paradigm shift. So as a university trainer, what I need to do is that I can't tell the future, but I can explain to my students that they will need to adapt, that their initial training at university will not be the end of their studies. Professional translators know that. If you graduated in the 1980s, well, you had to learn how to use CAT tools, you had to learn how to use a TMS, you had to learn how to use MT now. So it's clearly a continuous learning that you have to set up. So that's what I tell my students. We can't tell the future, but what is sure is that you can't think that, okay, I'm done with my studies, this is the end of it. You still need to develop your skills, and not only your technological skills, linguistic skills as well, because language is changing also, not only technology. So to answer your question, I can't tell what the future is, but what I know is that we need to tell our students that they will need to adapt, definitely, because this is definitely not the end of the change, and we don't even know if it's the middle. I used to tell my students a few years back that we were on the eve of something at the very, very beginning of NMT, we're the eve of something that would definitely change things. But now I don't know if I should say this is only the very beginning, the middle of it? Where are we heading? We don't know. We just need to adapt. And for me, that's part of the excitement. That's part of the fun.
Thank you very much for that. That reminds me of something we had in the conversations with James in the preparation for all this about the way language changes. Could you maybe tell the people the story that you told us about your son and the sort of way language is changing and how you see that?
So my son's 14, and he uses words that I have absolutely no idea what they mean. And he uses words that I think that I know what they mean, but it turns out I don't know what they mean at all. So I think one of the kind of key things about the evolution of language is that humans are always a step ahead of machines, which is why the machines always need the human input, which is a really, really important thing for translators in our industry.
Thank you very much for that, James. I realise this probably overlaps a little bit with the previous question, but if you could give a piece of advice about how you see the way forward, that would be very useful. And also at this point, if we could launch the Slido poll, because I would like the people in the audience and the people online, if they could also, in one or two brief words, like give us their opinion about what is needed for us to move forward into the future, how they see the way forward themselves. So if we can have that launched, and then we can compare the results from the Slido with what our panelists are saying here. Can we start with Adrian?
Yeah, my keyword from my perspective would be specialized. I think is the way forward. If you manage to specialize, if you manage to find clients that offer very targeted and unique and premium content, then this is where I want to work in. This is what's most fun. It's what's most lucrative. And as a freelance translator, that's the way forward. Be concise and be specialized.
Rudy?
I would also agree with specialization. So I would say be curious, be positive, and aim high. And by aiming high means, yeah, get specialized, definitely.
Britta?
I would say more for all of us also in this room that we need to collaborate. We need to collaborate across academia, research, industry, buyers, freelancers, so that we are not having these conversations in isolation. We had a discussion yesterday whether also for us as an LSP, machine translation is only a mean to reduce costs. It's actually not. It's part of a very essential workflow. So I think that we together can come to a conversation where we also, as you said, it needs to be on a fair pay. Nobody is interested in not paying excellent linguists a fair pay. And I think that we can achieve that by collaborating across like this.
And James?
So Rudy said it earlier, and I'm going to say it again. It's the F word. So it's fun, right? Because look, TV localization is really cool. And like, you know, it's such a cool job, and you get to watch loads of like really cool TV programs. It's great.
And you get your name on there.
And you get your name on telly as well, you know. So fame at last. You know, what I would say certainly to those of you who are entering the kind of the TV localization kind of sphere at the moment, welcome. Please stay. You know, we need you. You are absolutely essential. Localization is an art form, right? But it's also a business, and the two are codependent, and they exist together in unison, as well as your translation skills, which are incredible. Please think about what your value adds might be in a business scenario. Okay, and what I mean by that is, some of you might find that you're a really natural project manager, or you might be really good at client relationships or business development. There are lots and lots of things that you can do, and it goes back to what the guys are saying about specialising. So once you're in, think about what else it is that you want to do. Don't settle, and keep evolving and changing your business and change you, and keep learning skills. University, if that's the path that most people have taken, that is the start of your journey. You know, you've got lots more to learn. And you know, it's okay to have fun, and it's okay that it's a cool place to work. And I just wish you all that you have a career that brings you joy and satisfaction.
Thank you very much for that, James. Do we have the results of the Slido poll? Can we show them on screen? So we have some very interesting ones there. Refuse low rates, tying into the themes that we've seen the last few days. Keep an open mind from Anonymous. Cooperation, which ties into collaboration, which what Britta talked about. The focus on quality, specialization, which ties into what Adrian and Rudy were both saying. Specialization again. Are there any more results that we can see? Technological hiccup. Britta, could you talk maybe a little bit about how you see this idea of collaboration working in the future? Like you said, that this forum that we're currently at is an excellent way of collaborating, but can you see any other ways of collaborating?
Yeah, as I said, I think this is a very important forum, and many of us try to get engaged. What I can, and that was actually out of the conversation with James, who said, oh, he didn't know anything about what happens after he basically outsources whatever the content. So I also think we need to have much more education of our clients, because as a freelancer, as a linguist, but also as an LSP and as universities, we actually struggle to close that gap. Where if James understands the actual value that it creates, then that will also trickle down. So I think the collaboration also to the business world, to the commercial purpose of it is very, very important.
Thank you very much. And Aminda, do we have questions from the public?
I can give you a few more. I'll keep talking until someone can hear me. I don't know. Anyway, I'll give you a few more of the words that came out. Never stop learning, adaptability and curiosity. Thank you. Networking. I'll just say those ones in case you missed them. Adaptability and curiosity. Networking. Just having a look. Belief. Challenging. Courage. Hyper-specialized. So not just specialized, but hyper-specialized. So there's a few more words for you to react on if you want.
I'm happy that bleak is not there.
No, we generally see they're quite positive responses then in the Slido. So do you have any questions on Slido?
Oh yes, we've got loads of questions on Slido, I must say. Having not looked at them for a minute or two, I don't know quite what's happened. But a lot of people liked your analogy of the pilot and the plane. And the top voted question is not a question, but it says, would you board a plane without a human pilot? Well, I think we can also say not yet. Because again, that is coming. Automated planes, automated cars. So let's just relax about this technology, I think. The human will still be in the loop, but they'll always be there. But I don't know, James, what you, if you want to add anything.
That's also an interesting point, because I think also we need to turn it around, that humans also make mistakes. And humans make mistakes that machine don't do. So it's always two sides.
Absolutely. I'm going to go with the highest voted question, which is, I think, for our panelists over here, about do young people want to work for themselves, or are they really not given a different option? I think, first of all, well, I'd like to hear from a young person too, and then obviously I'd like to hear from the other panelists as well.
Of course, that's a huge generalization. I mean, I would say yes, in general. I feel like the younger generation is more into working independently and kind of figuring out the work-life balance. But we heard yesterday that working for yourself doesn't necessarily mean work-life balance. By now, I managed to have a very good one, but the beginning was tough to figure that out. But working for myself is the best thing that's ever happened. I mean, but I have to say, I wouldn't have done this and wouldn't have enjoyed this right after university. So I feel in my case, there would have been a too young age to work for myself. So I enjoyed the first years of working in a company, learning how I worked in a large import-export company. So I experienced working in different departments from a large business corporation. So these are all valuable assets that I took on in my professional experience, and I can use now in owning and scaling a business for myself. So I guess there's kind of a two-sided answer. I would say yes, people, but not really given a different option is kind of negative. I feel like working for yourself is ideal. So there are different options, but I wouldn't want another one.
Rudy?
It's hard to generalize, of course, but it's definitely a clear tendency. Definitely. I see it every year from my perspective with my students. Every year, I have some students who, after their internships, are offered a position. Sometimes temporary, sometimes even permanent after their 6-month internship. And they say, thank you, but no thanks. Because they want to be self-employed. This is what they have decided to do as a career. And that makes me so proud of them generally, because it's a risk they're taking, clearly. But that's a tendency that we see with the younger generation. They're clearly interested in being self-employed rather than having a salaried position, even when there is the possibility. So hard to generalize, but a clear tendency.
Well, I may not be part of the younger generation, but I would say that I work for myself and it's fantastic. Okay, I work a lot of hours, and certainly at the beginning, when I was starting, you have to put the effort in, but that's for any business that you do. But the fact that you can work out your schedule for yourself and you're the one answerable to yourself is very liberating, I would say, from my point of view. Right, let's have a look at Chris Durbin's question. The future of translation is low-paid post-editing, live with it, is still a message heard often in university circles, rather than focus on premium segments. Rudy, do you find no?
Absolutely not. I know, Chris, we know each other. I know you think that. But honestly, in many universities, including the French ones, we don't convey the message, the future is low-paid MTPE. That's not true. We keep telling them, you need to specialize, you need to find your specialization. You might need extra training if you want to specialize in legal translation or things like that. But no, we don't tell our students, you're going to be poor, you're going to work on only MTPE. There are many opportunities out there. I know that all universities probably don't do the job, but most of us do. Honestly, please believe in us and come and visit us if you don't believe me.
Okay, thank you. Let's just see if there are any questions from the floor. Okay, there's one over here, and then I'll go to that one over there. Please keep them short. Remember my definition of a question. 2 sentences and a question mark at the end, please.
It's all about specialization.
Talk into the microphone.
Sorry, apologies. I come from a bachelor degree where we are teach 3 to 4 languages in our choices. Some we start from the beginning, and some of them we must have from the secondary. Then we can proceed to a master's, where I'm at in the last year. And I had to give up some languages, like German, for example, which I love as a language. I have a question, which is, do you believe that not only specializing in languages, but also in some skills should come before taking a master's, or should it come before entering the professional market? Thank you.
Thank you.
That's for you. Should I go? Okay. No, I don't think you need to specialize before entering the market, honestly. I didn't. You can. It's good if you do. A lot of people do specific masters and bachelors in specific specializations. You know, you can do, we heard masters in audiovisual translation, for example, but me personally, I didn't. I did a general translation bachelor, and then I did a master outside of the language industry, but in a specialized field. And in this field, I'm now translating in. This all came naturally. A lot of people I talk to are terrified of specialization because it is so hammered into your brain. You need to specialize, otherwise you're going to fail. It's okay if you start as a generalist. It's okay if you stay a generalist, right? Some of the best translators are generalists. So it's not that serious. Don't take it too seriously. It will come naturally. I now specialize in sports. I would have never imagined that happens, right? I just found a random client and I loved it, and I push this now because I love working in sports content. So specialization is important, but it has time. It's more important to start, because if you worry about half a year what you should specialize, you should have started 6 months ago, and then you would already be ahead, right?
Okay, thank you. Rudy?
I can provide maybe a bit more information. Sometimes what I see in my training program is that actually students come and they have a BA from something else, legal or biology, things like that. And they come to translation afterwards for their master's degree. And actually they already have their specialization then, because they know a lot about one field. So it's a kind of boulevard for them, the specialization. But that's not the case of most trainees. Most trainees, they come from a language BA, so they need to figure out what their specialization is going to be, and then it takes place exactly as Adrian said, after university.
I always tell people there's always something you know more about than everyone else in this room, and that's your specialization.
Thank you. Good definition. Right, there was the other person who I identified. It was the person over there with the white top on.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Hi, my name is Raquel Melgar from Translation Planning and Support from DG Link at the Council. So coming back to what has been said here today regarding some clients that would choose low budget projects, or to the definition of quality is what the client expects. Do you think that we already have a translation industry driven by clients' interest? And in that case, do you think that it is actually safe to let the clients shape the industry? Thank you.
Interesting. Okay, well, we have a client here, who I'll come to in a moment, but I think I will start with you.
Yeah, so if I get the question correctly, should we let the client drive this, and not to put pressure on you, James? I think that, as I mentioned before, that the responsibility is very much on the client, and when it outsources to an LSP like my company, that is where the responsibility is. And I don't think that the client per se are pushing prices as such. It's because they might not know the complexity of what they're buying. But if we, as the professionals, actually are able to convey that message, then in collaboration we can define that. That should be the overall process, at least.
And James, as the client?
I've never seen a tiered system, so it's not something that I've ever experienced. We agree rates up front for a determined period of time, and then that's how we make the payment. So we would never compromise on quality, certainly not at BBC Studios. I mean, it's absolutely essential for us that quality is paramount. I mean, we do some incredible natural history shows presented by Sir David Attenborough, and many, many other shows that are heavily science and factual based. It's so important that we get it right. I mean, for example, quick show of hands, does anybody know what the difference between a Swedish mile and a mile is? Are you Swedish? Somebody else? No. All right. So can you tell us what the difference is between a mile and a Swedish mile?
Switch your microphone on.
A Swedish mile is 10 kilometers and an English mile is 1.6 kilometers.
Right. Now, who knew that?
No. Swedish people in the audience perhaps knew that.
Like Swedish contingent in today. So I guess that, you know, the The point, though, is that we just can't compromise on quality. So for us, it's not even an option. If I were offered a lower tier at a lower cost, I wouldn't take it. So I hope that answers your question.
And I mean, the thing is, though, that from your point of view, how do you check the quality? Do you have people checking it?
Yeah, so we have quality assessments, and firstly we expect the LSP to assess the quality of the output of their translators, and then we will check the quality of, independently, we'll check the quality as well of the localization.
Now, while you have the microphone, there is another question for you, which is, are the shortening deadlines due to unrealistic expectations of what tech can actually do, or not appreciating the entire process, or something else?
Often the shortening deadlines are usually because there have been unforeseen delays at production. It's generally as simple as that. I think you'll see some great examples where TV shows will deliver 3 months in advance of their release date, which is brilliant. And you'll see other examples where they'll deliver sometimes a couple of days in advance. It very much depends on the type of show as well. So if it's a documentary or a kind of fast turnaround, we call it news and current affairs, then those shows sort of logically will deliver very, very close to the wire. Yeah. Drama normally delivers earlier.
Okay, thank you. We have another question on Slido, which is quite an interesting one. It's discouraging to see people without degrees in translation getting the jobs that should go to certified translators. What do you have to say about that? And obviously, John, if you want to pop in and say something.
Yeah, I can see
it's easier there.
Yeah, this way. Well, the ELIS surveys that we conduct regularly every year in partnership with the EOETC and the other partners, ELIA, so on and so forth, show that there are many paths into the world of translation. And as Rudy already mentioned, some people study first law and then they become translators. Some people study translation first and then they become translators. And the ability of a person to translate is not determined just by the first degree that they do. There's a huge amount of human talent involved in that as well. You can learn to translate, but there is a huge talent aspect there too. So I don't really understand why the focus is on someone with a degree just in translation taking work from someone else. The people who have degrees in law who become translators are also equally qualified to translate and to act as professionals. They're able to join professional associations, all professional associations in FIT, and have different entry qualifications. Some of them are a degree in translation, some of them are a degree in law plus several years of practicing in translation. So there are many paths into the profession, and I would encourage anyone of any background, and it ties into what we said earlier about specialization, that if you have already a degree in some other field and you are interested in languages and you want to enter that field, you should enter that field and become specialized in, for example, legal translation, financial translation, mining translation, anything that you can imagine. It is, in some ways, it's a quicker way of getting to specialization, but it's equally valid as a way of entering the world of translation.
Yes, definitely. I definitely strongly disagree with the statement there, because you're not entitled to get jobs because you have a degree. That makes no sense. Felipe told me yesterday that the best chemistry translators are chemists and not translators. So no.
Okay, thank you. Now, fees, money, always very important. I'll come to you in a minute. I want to just go to Robin's question about charging your worth. Where does one get a decent and informed idea about what should be charged? I think I know what the answer to this is, but I'd like to hear from our panelists. Asking for a friend?
Well, I can start. As Henrik mentioned a little bit yesterday, up until now, professional translation associations have been hampered by European competition law in being able to discuss prices and fix prices and set minimum levels of what is acceptable and not acceptable. But the recent changes in the collective bargaining guidelines for solo self-employed people, which will cover translators, interpreters, terminologists, and so on and so forth, should see a change in this. We should be able, in the future, to negotiate with people like Britta for fair pay, so then we can spread the news among the professional community about what is an acceptable minimum or a range of pay that is acceptable. But this is something which is relatively new. The guidelines were only published on St. Jerome's Day, 30th of September this year, after a long period of consultation in which Fit Europe was involved. So we need to sit down around the table and see how this is actually going to pan out and work in practice. But there is a quite large shift and change now in relation to these questions of what can and can't be charged and what is fair pay and what is not fair pay. So it's basically a question of keep an eye on this spot and see how this area develops, because it is changing rapidly.
Do you want to come in, Britta?
Yeah, I heard about this yesterday, and I think that is a great measure that is taken in place, again, in order for all of us to have a baseline then to actually do the business case to the end client as well, saying this is what it costs because this is what is involved. And of course, apart from the linguist, there are also other parts that then the LSP is packaging all together. I think this is a great step forward, and also goes, I think, Rudy, very much in this. As you said, the gig economy or the freelance economy that is actually, being more and more attractive for young people. I see that also being connected, that we need to also protect the next generation actually wanting to be their own. So I only welcome that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take the question of the person in the blue shirt there. I'm afraid I've finished questions from the audience. I might be able to sneak one more in for Slido, if you keep it nice and short.
Yes, thank you very much. So my name is Thomas Tolnai. I'm a freelance translator from Romania. I have a question to the university representative here. How do you teach about freelancing? What do you tell students? Because okay, freelancing is great. I certainly love it, but it's not easy. It comes with a psychological toll, and because I think there are many young people in the room, you need to give them a realistic image about freelancing and what it entails. So how do you teach this at your university? Thank you.
Thank you.
I need to keep it short, right? That's what you said.
Very short.
Okay, I'll try, because that's, of course, a long question. You're right, it has to be realistic. If it's not realistic, then there is a problem. So first of all, what we do in many translation programs is that we have professionals, freelancers, that actually teach in the program. That's something very, very important. And then they can have some specific classes, like in my university, there is a class on project management, for example. There's also some training in accounting. There are also some different trainings on the specific French system. If you want to be a freelancer, what are the different administrative possibilities? Because you have a series of possibilities, but it's not the same for the taxes you have to pay. So all this has to be explained to them. But I totally agree with you. It has to be realistic from the first place, definitely.
Thank you for keeping that short and sweet. I'm now going to go to our last question, which is on Slido. Since the whole of the topic has been about access for all, I'd like to go to the question about the European Accessibility Act from Bert. What impact does it have on translations to be delivered, and how are the machine translation tools going to adapt to this? Now, everybody might be like, oh gosh, don't know much about the European Accessibility Act. Okay, I can see the microphone passing along here. Okay, all right. Well, that was a bit too much of a complicated question, I'm afraid, Bert. So in that case, what I think we should do is we should wrap up the panel maybe with a couple of words of inspiration from each of you.
You want to start, James?
Stay in localization, have fun.
I just want to reiterate that this is hopefully a paradigm shift, and we have a bright future.
what they said. Definitely, yeah. Ask questions. The last question was like, where can I get info about rates? Go on LinkedIn, type in your language specialization combination. Talk to people that do it, that are seasoned. They are willing to help. It helps so much.
As I said earlier, fun and positive. This is a very nice industry. Stop getting worried. Translators are always worried. It seems to be in their DNA. They was supposed to disappear right after the Cold War. No, it's not going to happen. So be positive. Enjoy yourself. There are many possibilities out there with very decent pay. So just go for it.
Wonderful. Well, I think we can wrap up this panel on that very positive note. Thank you. Please give a big round of applause. Sorry, Thank you, if you'd like to. So, as you've probably gathered from the time, we're coming to the end of the 2022 version of TEF. Thanks